you speak a little bit about what your expectations were when you started motorsport journalism? Were you just a fan like the rest of us, or was it a desire to be a journalist that became sports journalism? How was it framed for you? What were your expectations?
To be honest, I don't really think I had any expectations. It was a kind of converse series of circumstances. So it was around the time I realised this the other day, it'll be 2 years in about a couple of weeks' time from the first time I ever produced a video on Formula One. I had left my job, and around the time lockdown had hit, and therefore I was like, right, what do I want to do with my life? I had just finished my law degree at Lancaster, and was like, right, I've got to come up with a new path. I decided law wasn't really for me. I'd previously done a lot of kind of politics and democracy work, and decided actually I wanted to find something that I'm truly passionate about. And Formula One and motorsports in general had always been there. I joke, I was pretty much raised on two things: Formula One and rugby. Having been Welsh, is growing up as a kid, Michael Schumacher was my idol. I used to even joke that Michael Schumacher was my dad when I was in primary school. It was that much of a thing for me. And at the end, I had made some friends with some people on Twitter and found that we had a lot in common around sports, and decided to found my own YouTube channel called The Purple Sector. Started creating content there, and then realised actually I had a passion for writing. I'd always loved to do it when I was in school, but never really saw journalism as a viable career option. I think journalism often has a reputation, especially sports journalism, of a heavily male-dominated industry. Also, usually upper class. I come from a very working class background. University isn't cheap by any stretch of the means, so I kind of thought it wasn't an option. Whereas now, I was very fortunate with the kind of Welsh funding structure. I could decide, right, if I wanted to pursue this, I could, and I applied for the Cardiff University course covering news journalism, because I thought I'll try news and can always swap over at the end of the day. Got that, and then, funny enough, just through doing videos, I ended up having the owner of InsideF2 contact me and asked if I want to start writing covering Formula 2. And then from there, kind of started my degree. And then someone got in touch about the role at Motorsport Week covering Formula E. And then eventually just kind of snowballed from there. But I always laugh at the fact that the first ever press conference I ever did wasn't actually anything to do with motorsport.
Right.
It was the Wales men's under-21s football team, because I had turned to my tutor and said, I want to do, whilst at uni, I want to cover sport. And he said, right, go out, go and see what you can do. And I ended up getting accredited by the Welsh Rugby Union, the FIA, and the Welsh Football Association, and went from there and found that a lot of those skills kind of traverse between sports, and having that wide breadth of sports that I could cover. I covered darts at one point, I've covered rally or netball or hockey. It just gave me so much more experience that's handy because in sport it's very rare you'll be able to specialise in one sport, because a lot of the national platforms need you to be kind of a jack of all trades.
So in the first days of the Purple Sector YouTube channel, was it really important that you were able to connect with like-minded people on social media and find a group of not only an audience for your content, but also people to make content with? What was that like, seeking out collaborators and sharing your ideas and realizing that that shared passion was there and there was really an opportunity to have some success and make some good stuff?
It was great. I think Twitter's one of them, especially Twitter, I think is one of them places that oftentimes can be quite hostile on social media. It tends, I think probably this Formula One season has exemplified it more than anything.
Definitely,
it's just how polarizing it can be. Sometimes you can't even have a conversation, but other times you can find those communities. I know so many people, to be honest, some of my closest friends in the industry I wouldn't have met without it. And I think that element of being able to share ideas, share content, for me, I was a big pusher on wanting to encourage more women into motorsport and encourage a more diverse background. I also did some social media work for Racing Pride, the motorsports LGBTQ plus organisation, because there wasn't, oftentimes I think there was a perception that the industry wasn't for them, whereas now, looking at the growth on social media, there's so many amazing female content creators out there, and so many more people that are from a similar background to me and a more diverse background overall, which is incredible. And it allows the fans to feel more connected, because sometimes I would watch videos, like, for example, I love Josh Revel's videos.
Oh, yeah, he's good. Yeah,
absolutely amazing, and I love them. And then you think actually, oh, I have a lot of quite similar opinions, quite different opinions on some things. Actually, let's go and put them into words. Sometimes videos would work. I think the one thing you kind of learn with YouTube and any form of production very quickly is things can work one day and look terrible the next, but it's ultimately about that progression and getting more comfortable and confident on camera. And I was lucky that during the early stages of my degree, I applied for Formula E's Young Talent Call for a presenter and actually got shortlisted to one of the finalists. Never would have thought that would happen because I'd never presented in my life other than a PowerPoint presentation at university. It was never really a thing I'd done, but it was just having that experience and finding those communities. And I wouldn't have done it without social media having given me a platform to be able to express my opinions and not being afraid to have them. I think that's these days a thing that a lot of people worry about. Ultimately, if you're a fan of anything in the world, you're going to have an opinion on it. And it's about finding the right way to communicate those opinions. Have a debate. I love having Twitter debates with people, as long as they're sensible and as long as they're respectful. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that mutual respect is sometimes that when things get so polarized can be missing from it.
So who are some of your favorite creators or creators that inspired you in those early days that really showed you what your content style was going to be as a presenter, and how did you take inspiration from creators and kind of evolve your own style in that way?
I think it was kind of a mix. I think Jack Threlfall was one of the first. TJTS was also, he was kind of one of the first YouTubers I ever saw go really, really big in terms of, I think it was around the time of his Alex Albon he was doing a lot of content on Alex Albon, and then suddenly out of nowhere, there was just this big boom of content creators. I think also, I probably should give her a shout out, is Katie Fairbairn at WTF1, which I joke I am a bit biased on working with them, but I think the fact that she comes across so eloquent, but also herself on camera, I think that's the fact of having a personality. I don't like the idea of being devoid of personality when you're presenting, because I think that ultimately gives it life, and the fact that you ultimately yourself engages with people. If people wanted to watch a carbon copy of things, they wouldn't watch certain content if it didn't have that liveliness to it. I also think in terms of writing as well, as not so much in terms of video because she doesn't do content producing, but in terms of writing, was Hazel Southwell. She is one of my favorite people, and she covers Formula E incredibly, especially places like Race Fans and The Drive. And it was having that confidence and knowledge. And we were at the Jaguar Season 8 car launch last year, and even then, because she knows far more about cars than I do, just like road cars and automotive industry in general, I couldn't believe how much she knew. She was like an encyclopedia, and it had the element of actually, we know our stuff in the industry. Is not to be, I think sometimes there's also, I don't like the phrase false modesty, but I think sometimes we're often afraid to believe that we do know something when we do, and actually having that confidence to be like, actually, no, I know what I'm talking about, and I can talk about it clearly and concisely and generate these kinds of discussions. But yeah, there's lots of amazing content out there. I spend most of my evenings literally going through my YouTube recommended. There's that many.
Sure. I've been checking my YouTube analytics a lot today because of the Michael Massey news, because some of my clips have been picked up by the algorithm. So every few hours I'll be like, all right, how many views has this got this hour? Checking the stats, guys. It's quite satisfying to watch them go up. It's nice.
Yeah.
Do you think that?
News.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I have that with news stories all the time, like seeing the analytics in the end of last season going, I've never had this many people read a story ever before in my life, and just seeing that growth and knowing your hard work's paid off at the end of the day. I think there's nothing more satisfying than seeing an article and seeing someone's comment saying, I've learned something, or I've provoked, not say a debate, but a discussion around a topic. I think that there's nothing more satisfying than it.
And is that personal connection with your audience, being able to get comments and feedback and have direct engagement, is that something that's motivating to you, or can it be frustrating at times too?
I'd say both. I think sometimes frustrating in the sense when you see something written that's either, the worst one is the fact that I've been accused of being both a biased Lewis Hamilton fan and a biased Max Verstappen fan in the same article, even when it's not on them. And sometimes it is a frustration when you've said something in an article and you stand by your judgment. People don't have to agree with me. If we all agreed with each other, it'd be a pretty boring place, but not necessarily understanding that someone else might have the same or different opinion than them. It doesn't mean one's right and one's wrong. It just is an opinion at the end of the day. It's not a fact. It does get frustrating, but it also is so equally rewarding. And having, with WTF1, that is actually like one of the greatest things, is it's a platform by fans for fans, which isn't like so many other major publications out there. We can have that dialogue and that engagement. I'll get article ideas, literally scrolling through comments on the article and going, when everyone was talking about Michael Massey getting sacked months ago, people were going, well, I don't know who can replace him. I don't even know who the deputies are. I don't know who this person is. So I wrote an article, literally waiting for the moment to see if Massey was going to get sacked, to say, here's who's come out. When Formula E changed the qualifying format, I was able to cover that break it down as the steps for people who had never watched Formula E before. And then people came back and commented and said, oh, I read your article, I've watched it, I actually quite enjoyed it, and I'm going to watch more races now. And that level of satisfaction, knowing that your article has helped someone learn something, and then also giving you ideas in the process and generating conversations. I've had so many articles now that have just come up from random ideas that I've had while scrolling through social media. It's the best place to find stories, even if it's either news, because I joke Twitter seems to find out everything before anyone else does, but also then generating, say, features and more lengthy discussions. And even YouTube, unfortunately, I'm able to write scripts as well for the channel, so getting to cover things like pay drivers and all that. So then Matt, our presenter, can go out and kind of put his own unique twist on them. He has his own unique twist on stories. Tommy does stuff on socials, and Kate does stuff kind of across all three as well. And then even putting really random pop culture references into stories. I joke I never could have done that at a major news platform, but I get to do it there.
And so is that something, do you think specific to WTF1, or you said it's a big reason behind the success of it as a channel, that it promotes that kind of close fan engagement? Is that one of the reasons why you wanted to work there?
It definitely was. I think kind of WTF1 was kind of the big platform that got me into Formula One journalism, in the sense of across the years I was an avid subscriber of their YouTube channel, watched their videos constantly, especially things like Internet's Best Reactions. I joke, I actually do laugh at the fact that I appeared on it once.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, I just remember this was before I worked for them, but I appeared on it, and it was just one of them moments of going, it is that reciprocal relationship at the end of the day. I think it's seen a lot more now in content creation, that bond. I think also it's exemplified more, say, with the change in the teams as well. Like I remember back when Sebastian Vettel was at Red Bull, and Red Bull were a hip social team because they went and did funny jokes and funny videos with him and Daniel. And then nowadays you've got like McLaren launching their car on Roblox.
Right. Wow.
Like that kind of engagement with their fans you wouldn't have seen 10, 20 years ago. There was very much, I think, during probably Bernie Ecclestone's days of F1, kind of a glass screen between the fans and Formula One. That's completely shattered now. There's so much more open relationship, partially through Drive to Survive, whether some elements of it are good, some elements of it not always so good, is kind of up for debate. But I think that with WTF1 and with a lot of the platforms now, we're so fan focused, we can have the conversations that, say, BBC can't have the same discussions about certain topics because the impartiality rules don't allow it at the end of the day, whereas we can have these discussions and talk about it in a way that's accessible. I think that's one of the best bits, is that accessibility. We don't assume fans know stuff, but also we don't make people feel bad for not knowing things. Like, for example, when we've had rules about tyres being changed during red flags, or the gentleman's agreement, I joke that gentleman's agreement, the name of it, no one knows. If you're a dedicated fan, you know what it is. If you've never watched F1 before, you've seriously got to ask, what's a gentleman's agreement? Why does it exist? And oftentimes you can Google it, but articles covering it will just say a gentleman's agreement and won't explain what it is. If I have to add one line explaining a topic that makes it easier for 1,000 fans to understand, then it's worthwhile at the end of the day.